What is up, everybody? This is JP with jpfitnesspro.com. Here in the next coming weeks, I'm going to have some hypertrophy and powerlifting programs up for sale on my website. I'll also have some options for customized training plans and online coaching as well, if that's more of your thing. So please keep checking back at jpfitnesspro.com. Today's episode of the Exercise Science Podcast is going to be a community podcast. I posted on my social media platforms for you guys to ask me any questions related to strength, gaining muscle, or weight management. And then I said that I would answer them on this podcast, which is what I'm going to do. A quick note, though, is that all of the answers that I'm giving are my expertise put forth to the answers. They are not an end all be all answer to your guys' questions. So I don't want you to think that I'm disregarding anyone else's opinion. There are certain areas of fitness that are black and white, and it's really hard to argue against them because so much research has been shown that these things are truths kind of in exercise. But there are a ton of areas of fitness that are not black and white, that are just gray areas, and the scientific literature is not 100% clear on what the truth is. So again, there are a lot of people in the fitness industry that have opposing viewpoints, and they could both be right or they could both be wrong. So my opinion is not there to replace anyone else's opinion or anything like that. It's just my expertise, and I'm giving you guys my knowledge and giving you the best answer I can give. Also, in this for these answers, I'm just going to give first names. I'm not going to give any last names out of the respect of the people asking the questions. All right, the first question comes from Chelsea, and she has a two-part question. And I'm going to tackle the first part first, and that is, which muscle groups should you work together while strength training? Strength is a skill, and the ultimate goal of strength training is to become stronger in specific exercises. So in my opinion, there isn't any muscle groups that you should plan to work together. Now, again, strength is focused on getting stronger in specific exercises. So obviously, the muscle groups that you're going to be working for an exercise are the muscle groups for that exercise. So a squat is obviously going to work your glutes, your hamstrings, and your quads. And essentially, it's a total body movement kind of, because, you still need a lot of back musculature a lot of back musculature is being involved to, help stabilize the spine and keep a proper form of your back and things like that. But ultimately, the prime movers in a squat are going to be your hamstrings to an extent, a little bit, and then more importantly, your quads and your glutes. So those are the muscle groups that are going to be worked during that lift. But if you're talking about in regards to what muscle groups should be worked together with different exercises, it doesn't really matter in my opinion. Not really that much at all. You could work opposing muscle groups and still gain strength on both. What matters more than that, which is still kind of related to your question, is making sure that you understand that as you go throughout the workout, the longer the workout goes on and the more exercises you do, the last few exercises and sets you do, you're going to have a lot higher fatigue than the first few exercises and the first few sets you do. So with your strength-based movements, or the movements that you want to get stronger at, make sure that they are near the beginning of your workout and not the latter half of your workout. So for example, we'll take the powerlifting exercises, which is squat, bench, and deadlift. I would not stack all your strength versions of those movements on the same day. So don't do heavy bench press, which is higher weight, higher percentages of 1 rep max, and then higher RPEs. RPEs, rating of perceived exertion, or how hard the set is. So don't put all your high difficulty heavy weight sets all on the same day and all your light sets all on another day. What I recommend is starting your workout with your more difficult, heavier movements. Like for example, one day you might start with a heavy squat, and then if you're working those same 3 exercises, a squat, a bench, and deadlift, you may have heavy squats that day. You may have lighter deadlifts for less volume, and then you may have more of a moderately heavy bench press. So again, you're kind of balancing out the 3 exercises. You're not doing all your heavy versions of those exercises on the same day, because again, if you do, the last exercise is always going to kind of in a weird way get the just to be blunt, it's going to get the like shit effort. You're going to get the bad quality reps. You're going to get the fatigued reps. You're not going to be at the top of your game when you're doing that last exercise. So it's not really, I can set up multiple different training plans where I have completely different muscle groups, but if I structure them well, I can have them on the same day. For example, I would say I could have heavy squats and heavy rows on the same day, but that's probably the extent of heavy work I do on that day. If I did anything else, it wouldn't be heavy, because anything after that would get like, you'd be fatigued from the first two exercises, and you start getting like lower quality reps, lower quality work. Again, you have to think of strength as a skill, and anything that's a skill, if you do in a fatigued state, you're not going to do as good at. So again, to sum up that part of your question, it doesn't really matter what muscle groups you work together, as long as you're not doing too many strength-based movements on the same day, and it's just structured well. Now the second part of your okay, and then again, that part of your question was a little bit more open in general. It's not 100% clear cut. That was more of kind of my opinion in that. But this next question is pretty clear cut, especially when it comes to strength, if you're asking. And that part of your question is, how many times in a week should do you recommend working each muscle group? And again, this is one of those kind of black and white areas. If you're a beginner, or I wouldn't even say beginner. If you're a beginner, you could probably get away with starting out working a muscle group one time a week, but even then I would still recommend this next frequency. But anything past that, and for most frequencies, even beginners too, the scientific literature has shown 2 to 3 times a week for a muscle group is very optimal for seeing the most gains in strength. So for example, let's just say you're doing 6 sets a week in squat. I would prefer, and again, the scientific literature has shown, doing 2 different days of squats with 3 sets each day is superior than doing all 6 sets on one day. And why is that? There's only so much volume we can handle in one day and recover from fully in one day. So for example, if you have all your 6 sets on one day, yes, you may be, depending on your training age, you may or may not be able to recover from that fully in one day. But let's just say you're at an advanced enough training age that you can recover from those full sets. You may say, well, what if I can recover from 6 sets in one workout? Can I do them all in one day? Yes, you can. But again, previously to what like I just said, think of strength as a skill. If you have 6 sets of heavy squats on one day, or any type of squats on one day, the last 3 sets of those squats and those 6 sets are going to be of less quality than your first 3 sets. The first 3 sets you're going to do are you're going to have more energy, and you're not going to be as fatigued. Your form, I guarantee you, your form is going to look better. Even if you try it on all 6 sets, I guarantee you the form of your first 3 sets is going to be better than your last 3 sets, just due to general fatigue. Also, the first 3 sets, you're going to be able to lift for either 1 more reps or 2 heavier weight than you would have your last 3 sets, again, due to fatigue. So having 3 sets on 2 different days for a total of 6 sets that week is better than having all 6 sets on one day. Again, due to what I said, is you're going to have 2 different days where you're doing 3 sets where you're very fresh, all very high quality reps, and you're probably going to be able to do heavier weight or more reps on those days than if you stacked it all in one day. So again, doing a muscle group 2 to 3 times a week is most optimal. All right, that was the last part of your question. So that was a very good question. All right, the next question comes from Martel. And one quick note, you guys, is sorry if I mess up your guys' names. I've never met a lot of you guys in person or at all, so I'm just trying to pronounce the names as best as I can. So the next question comes from Martel, and he's asking a question about weight management. And basically, he kind of had a 2-part question, as well as what's the best way to lose weight, and then what types of foods to eat. So I recommend eating as a whole foods plant-based diet to stay healthy and for optimal weight loss. If you guys didn't know, I'm vegan, and I try to be as unbiased as I can. I used to not be vegan, but I am vegan, and I wholeheartedly and 100% believe, if you look at the scientific literature and an unbiased view, that a whole foods plant-based diet, or a healthy vegan diet, because you could be a vegan and eat unhealthy, but a whole foods plant-based diet or a healthy vegan diet is the best way to stay healthy in regards to your diet. I've seen too much too much data, too much scientific data and studies that show the negative consequences of eating animal products. Again, this is a very controversial subject. You may disagree with me, you may not. But again, I used to not be vegan before until I just kept seeing, study after study and too much data that shows that just eating animal products is unhealthy. So for that part of the question, he says what types of foods to eat is vegetables, fruits and vegetables, basically a whole foods plant-based diet. Those are the types of foods to eat. Now, in regards to the other part of your question, which is losing weight, I would say that there's two important things, and this is kind of be a recurring theme for this podcast and these questions. The two most important things to losing weight is, if I had to only pick two, remember there's lots of things with the diet, but if I had to only pick two, it would be diet adherence and then caloric maintenance. And by diet adherence is, what I would recommend is picking foods that you enjoy eating that you know are healthy. That is the most important thing in regards to a diet. Everybody knows how to eat healthy, which is the funny part. Everybody knows how to eat healthy. Almost everybody does. They know what they needed to do. If I showed people a bunch of options, if I gave people 10 options and I said pick 2 healthy options or 1 healthy option, and in those 10 options I included random foods, healthy foods, unhealthy foods, I guarantee you most people are going to be able to pick out the healthy foods. So most people know what to eat. It's just that they can't stick to the diet. The stuff that they think is healthy tastes like shit. Just to be frank, it tastes like shit. That's what they think, or the foods that are healthy. And I'm not saying that none of them do. I can name a handful of healthy foods right now that I absolutely hate. I don't like olives. I think olives are disgusting. Raw onions, I absolutely hate. I just don't like them. Raw bell pepper, I don't like. All 3 of those foods are healthy, and I don't like either of them. But there are healthy foods that I do like asparagus, cooked onion I like, bananas, things like that I do like. So what I recommend for losing weight is find foods that are healthy that you like to eat. Write down a whole list. Don't include anything you don't like. Just make sure it's healthy and make sure you like it. Just write down a whole list. Then once you have that list, you need to take in less calories than you're expending. That's as simple as that. It's caloric maintenance. Now, if you picked healthy foods that you enjoy eating, this shouldn't be as hard. A lot of people don't know any healthy foods that they like to enjoy, that they enjoy eating. But again, if you took a second to do that, then it shouldn't be as hard to eat these foods, that are healthy, and you're trying to eat less calories than you're expending. The thing is, people try to do too much at one time. They're eating foods that taste like shit to them. They don't like them. They're eating less calories than they're expending. They're working out. They're busy. They're doing all these things, and it's just making their diet not work for them. You need to stop picking diets that don't work. So eat foods that you like is the main thing, and then find out how many calories you're expending, and then eat less than that. You can do that multiple ways. You can go on like an online calorie calculator. I think it's TDEE.net, Total Daily Energy Expenditure.net. Or you could just type in TDEE calculator on Google. Boom, there should be a calorie calculator right there. It pops up. Put in your information, and then it's gonna spit out a number for you. Count your calories for a few weeks. Eat as many calories as you're supposed to as that calorie calculator gave you that number, and then track your weight on a day-to-day basis. But don't base how much weight you're getting or losing on one single day. Track your weight over 2 weeks while you're eating the amount of calories you got from the calorie calculator. Track how many calories you're eating every single day. But also track your weight on a scale too. So if the calorie calculator told you, you need to eat 2,400 calories a day, you count your calories that you eat of the food you eat for every day for 2 weeks, and you're eating 2,400 calories. If you're losing weight, then that's probably the amount of calories that you if you're eating less than that and you're losing weight, then that's probably in the amount of calories. It's probably correct. It's probably somewhere around there. Now, if you're eating that many calories and you're not losing weight and you also don't feel hungry at all, then that's probably that the calculator might be a little off. People need to realize that these calorie calculators are not perfect. They're just estimates. There's a billion little things that go into how many calories we expend. But again, so just to kind of wrap up his question, he's losing weight is diet adherence, picking a diet with foods that you generally enjoy, and then eating less calories than you expend. All right, on to the next question from Gage. I'm going to tackle one of his questions because the other one just seemed a little bit outside my scope of practice, but I guess I could kind of tackle it too. It's not outside my scope of practice. It's just a little bit more of a complex question. But the first part of his question was he was working, and then during his job, his job uses a lot of basically his chest musculature, which could be his front delts, his chest, and his triceps probably as well. And that he felt he felt like he was getting stronger during his job, but his he felt like clicking and popping in his shoulders, like his shoulders would hurt. Though what that probably means, and this is probably it, is that when you're doing a job that's working your front musculature, your chest, your triceps, and your shoulders, and your shoulders start to hurt in any way, that you get clicking, popping going on, that tells me is that there's two major things going on here. One, it probably has to do with your rotator cuff. A lot of people work their push muscles, or what other people like to call it are your show muscles. Those are the muscles at the front side of your body. Basically, anything you can see in a mirror is what people like to work. And people like to work chest, and they like to work the shoulders, and they like to work the triceps, you know? So the biceps as well, but in this case, your problem is with your chest and shoulders. You said your chest constantly popped afterwards. So what I recommend is that you're probably working too much of these muscle groups, and you're not taking care of your shoulders. And by taking care of your shoulders you're not working your rotator cuff. There's 4 muscle groups that make up the rotator cuff. That's your subscapularis, your supraspinatus, your infraspinatus, and your teres minor. 3 of those are on the back of your shoulder, or on your back, the back side of your body. And that's your supraspinatus, your infraspinatus, and your teres minor. You need to focus on shoulder exercises that focus on external rotation of the shoulder, not internal rotation of the shoulder. If you take your arm and you put it straight in front of you, and you rotate your arm outwards, so your hands are facing the sky, that external rotation of your arm is from those 3 muscles that I just said on the back of your shoulder, on your back. Now, if you internally rotate your arm so your palms face down, you're rotating your arm inwards towards you. That is your subscapularis and your chest doing that. Again, the push muscles, your chest, your shoulders, and your subscapularis, your internal rotators, those always get worked in the gym, and they always get worked through people's daily lives most of the time. They're just getting overworked. It's overworked. People love doing bench press. People like doing push-ups. And like you said, Gage, that you were working them during your job a lot, and you could feel like you were getting stronger. They were probably getting overworked. And to compound this fact is that when you sit down at your desk or at your house, if you play video games, if you do anything where you're sitting at a desk, I guarantee you have some forward rounding of your shoulders going on, which is further shortening of your chest muscles in your shoulders. So on top of the fact that you're working these muscle groups during your job, but you're also kind of shortening these when you sit down and when you're living your everyday life, these muscles are constantly being shortened, while the muscles on the backside of your body, including your external rotators, are always being lengthened and not worked. So what you need to do is probably twofold. If I had to sum up your question, is work the external rotators of your rotator cuff, which is the one thing. Do exercises to strengthen those. 2, or I guess it's a 3-part answer. 2, which would be stop working your chest muscle groups as much. You're probably just doing too much, way too much in that area. Stop doing pressing exercises. Stop doing squeezing exercises as much. And 3, stretch all of that area of your out, the front side of your body. Basically, the front side of your upper body needs to be stretched out. You need to do exercises that stretch it, which means you need to do exercises that shorten the back of your body. So for example, leaning up against a wall and stretching your chest out, things like that. I can't show you right now because it's a podcast, but anything that stretches out your chest, stretches out your shoulder, and externally rotates the arm would be good stretches. You're shortening this way too much. It needs to lengthen. You need to stretch it out and just stop overworking it. The other question that you had, which I'm going to try to answer this very quickly because it's a very general question. You said what type of protein is best, and you said you take whey protein. Is that again, I'm vegan. I personally, from what I've seen in the scientific literature, from what I've seen, anything that includes an animal product in it is not going to be as healthy or healthy at all compared to a plant-based alternative. So what protein should you take? Just eat a wide variety of foods that include protein. That's it. And when it comes to protein powders, any plant-based protein powder that has a mixture of protein. So for example, if you look up a plant-based protein powder on any website that sells protein powder, if it has a mixture of plant-based proteins, and by mixture I mean typically it'll say this plant-based protein is a combination of rice protein, pea protein, and soy protein. Those are good proteins. Typically I don't get proteins that come from one protein source, because again, a wide variety of protein sources is better. You want a wide mixture of the amino acid profiles in the protein that you're getting. So again, plant-based protein powder that comes from multiple sources. Again, it'll typically say soy, pea, and rice protein. That's what it's a mixture of. To me, that's the best protein you can get. Other than that, there's no I guess there's not a specific type of, this protein, this type of protein is better than other types of proteins. Just eat a wide variety of foods that contain protein in it. All right, on to the next question. And again, sorry if I'm pronouncing the name wrong. It's from Zahar, or Zayar, I think it is. He said, and this is one of those questions that's a little bit outside of my scope of practice, but I'm gonna try and answer it from my perspective and not from what he's asking, because again, I don't do martial arts. I want to just for practice, but I don't currently. He said that what can you do to have a more powerful jab? And I'm going to go by one of the things that he told me before this. And he says that he trains these before his workout, his jab. He trains his jab and his cross before his workouts, every single workout, to failure. And he said he wants a more powerful jab. The one thing that I can say from a strength and conditioning aspect, not from a martial arts aspect, obviously technique is going to be the most important thing when it comes to a jab and a cross, which I can't talk about. So I guess technique would be the most important thing. But when it comes to strength and conditioning, you told me you trained to failure with those punches, with the jab and a cross before your workout. If you're focused on power, you probably should not be training to failure. Now, if you're training for conditioning, you should be training to failure. Obviously, you're trying to work on conditioning. But if you're training for power, I do not recommend training to failure. I really do not recommend that. Because think about this. If you're training to failure, that means you're going until you really can't do anymore, or it's just hard to keep going. By that point, I guarantee you, your form is starting to falter when you're getting close to fatigue. And this goes back to the same thing with that I was talking about earlier, strength being a skill. Power-based movements are also a skill. Think of like Olympic lifts. They're very explosive, you know. You shouldn't do Olympic style lifts to form failure, to fatigue. I guess form failure you could because your form stops, but I wouldn't recommend it. And then even then you said to failure, which I'm assuming you just took it until it was absolute failure, like you couldn't throw an effective jab or a cross anymore. So what I recommend is if you're training those movements, have days where you train conditioning type movements, you know, and then you're not training for power. And those are the days you can train those punches or kicks or whatever you're throwing to failure. But on the days where you're training for absolute power, focus on very high quality jabs and crosses. Very high quality jabs and crosses. So again, I can't talk about technique, but since you're doing these, whatever you know is optimal technique, or if you have a coach, a striking coach, whatever is optimal technique for your jab and your cross, whatever type of style you're throwing, throw as perfect and as explosive technique as you can. So don't train to failure. You should not be feeling so tired that you can't have optimal technique. If your technique is starting to falter, and then you're training past that and it keeps faltering, you're going to ingrain bad habits. And ingraining bad habits is ultimately going to lead to decreased power output. So I would say, and on top of that too, you have to think is when you're more fatigued, you're going to be, your punches are not going to be as fast. So again, I wouldn't train power movements to fatigue, because again, you have to ask yourself, are you training for cardio, or are you training for power? If you're training for power, then why are you training to the point that you're fatigued and tired? You know, that doesn't make any sense. You know, your technique is going to go bad, and like ultimately when you get fatigued to the point where your punches aren't fast anymore, you're going to have low power output anyways. So what I would recommend is stop maybe a few punches a few punches, like a few jabs and a few crosses before form failure, before your form starts to falter. So you should stop before your form starts to falter. So don't even go to that. Don't go until your form falters. So stop before that, and all your punches should be very explosive. So when you first start your workout, whatever your punches look like, your first couple punches, your first couple jabs, and your first couple crosses, all your punches should look like that during your power day. So if you're running some like jabs and crosses, maybe label one day as a power day, and then label one day as a cardio day. And then on the cardio day, you can take your punches to that you can take those to a failure at that point, because again, you're trying to fatigue yourself. That's your goal. So again, to sum it up, is I wouldn't train to failure, because when you train to failure, your punches become, they're no longer that powerful anymore, and then your technique starts to falter, and you don't want to ingrain bad habits. So again, I didn't talk too much about technique there, because again, I don't know proper technique for a jab or a cross. So hopefully I answered that question good for you. All right, the next question comes from Enes. He asked me, what are my thoughts on intermittent fasting? And I'm assuming he means for either staying healthy or for losing weight. I have seen a little bit of scientific research that shows that intermittent fasting could be or is healthier for the average person. Like, there are some certain markers of health, like hormone levels and things like that, that show that intermittent fasting could be slightly healthier for an individual. Again, that could be an evolutionary thing. Maybe when people were evolving, they didn't always have food around, and the fact that we have 24/7 access to food, maybe it's a little bit abnormal that people consistently eat all the time. But again, that wasn't a ton of research that I've seen on that. But so again, as long as you're not eating all the time, you're probably fine in that regard, and you're not being unhealthy. So again, when it comes to being healthy, I guess if it's 16 hours of constantly eating versus 2 or 3 meals in an 8-hour period, I would probably say that the 2 or 3 meals in an 8-hour period could be healthier. And if I had to make a bet, I'd make a bet on that. But again, the scientific research that's out there right now isn't very in depth. There's not a ton of it. So again, it's maybe conclusive. So that's not really a very specific, it's not very specific what the answer is to that currently right now. But if I had to make a guess, I would say intermittent fasting, it might be a little healthier than just consistently eating all day. Now, in regards to weight loss and weight gain, I have not seen a lot of research in that. And then a lot of the research that I have seen just basically shows that as long as your daily caloric intake is less than whatever you're expending, you're gonna lose weight. So if you have someone on an intermittent fasting diet, if they're eating more calories than they're expending, they're not going to lose weight. If you have someone not on an intermittent fasting diet, let's just say they're eating the majority of the days all the time, then if they're eating more calories than they're expending, they're not going to lose weight. So it all comes down to how many calories are you eating and how many calories are you burning that day. If you're not doing shit and you're eating a ton of calories, you're probably going to gain weight, or at least maintain your weight. So there really is nothing special about intermittent fasting. It really isn't. Now that I'm saying that, even though I'm saying that there's nothing special inherently by intermittent fasting, if you like, now this is where it becomes like an individual basis thing and more of an opinion and preference. Even though there's nothing magical about it, if you like intermittent fasting, if that works for your schedule and your diet, let's just say you can't eat breakfast, boom, that automatically makes you an intermittent faster, is where you can't eat breakfast and now you're just eating in the later half of the day. And that works for you, and you're still getting your calories in and you're seeing success doing what you're doing. There's no point in changing what you're doing. Some people don't like eating breakfast, or for example, some people don't like eating right after their workout because they feel queasy or nauseous. I've heard that. In any one of those cases, you're basically now an intermittent faster. If you skip a meal, you're now an intermittent faster, because you're really not eating you're only eating a couple meals in the day now. Then if it works for you, then keep doing it. I've never seen anything dangerous about intermittent fasting. I mean, if you take it to an extreme, like you only eat for 3 hours and you don't eat any time else, that's obviously pretty ridiculous. But most people, from what I've seen, it's you take an 8-hour period, you get all your meals in that 8-hour period, and then you don't eat for the rest of the day. And then if you include sleep, basically 16 hours you're not eating, and then 8 hours you're getting in all your meals. If that's what you like doing, you don't feel funny when you're doing it, you don't feel like you're dying, your quality of life's not going low, like you don't always feel hungry or anything. If it works for you, then keep doing it. You know, it's just I have to say though, there's nothing inherently special about it. So that's my thoughts on intermittent fasting. That was a good question. The next question comes from Mike Torres. He asked, for someone wanting to start losing weight, what should they focus on first? He said weights, diet, cardio, etc. And I say by far, and this is, again, there's multiple ways you can lose weight, but from my expertise and from what I know is 100% diet. 100%. The reason why I say that is because caloric expenditure does not go up dramatically in regards to a workout regime. So if you start getting someone who's overweight and they're on a shitty diet and they're not working out, if you start that person by working out first, but they stay on their shitty diet, they're not going to lose weight. I can almost 100% guarantee that, because workouts don't increase caloric expenditure dramatically. Now, if you're going on some like military like workout regime where again, which most people don't, which I don't recommend anyway, obviously at that point you're probably expending so many calories that you might be able to get away with some shitty eating. But again, that's nothing close to what normal workouts are. Even if you went from not working out to working out 5 times a week, which I don't recommend, I'm not saying I recommend that, but even if you go from 0 workouts to 5 workouts a week, if you're eating a shitty diet, excess calories, shitty food, you're not going to lose weight. So by far, I recommend you, if your goal is to start losing weight, if you had to pick one, I say start on your diet 100%. You need to focus on eating healthy foods that you enjoy eating. That's a big important part, like I talked about earlier. You need to focus on foods that you enjoy eating. And then you need to focus on taking in less calories than you're expending. So diet, but again, that's assuming that you can only focus on one thing. Obviously, if you can, and this is ideal, if you can, you should focus on working out, but also cleaning up your diet as well. But again, you asked if I had to, where would they start? It would be diet 100%. You can lose weight by not working out and having a good diet. You cannot lose weight if you're eating excess calories and you're working out. It's borderline impossible. So again, diet by far, but ideally you would rather do both. The next question is from Elias, and he said it wasn't a question for him for particular, but he said I should go over how building a foundation of muscle is good for weight loss versus balls out cardio, which I do recommend. That is a good point he put out there, is that a lot of people, when they're trying to lose weight, they if they don't know better, again, and that's not no fault of your own, some people just, that's not their passion is fitness. So what they do is they don't do any weightlifting, and they just do a shit ton of cardio. I mean, they just go nuts on cardio. They'll do an hour of cardio 5 times a week. So it's 5 hours of cardio a week, and they don't focus on that. Now, what is inherently bad about that, and this is what he's trying to point out here, is that when you focus too much on cardio and not enough on weightlifting, what happens is your body makes adaptations to cardio. You make cardiovascular adaptations. And that's basically the opposite of what your body makes when it comes to weightlifting adaptations. Your body has no real reason to increase muscle mass when you're doing cardio, obviously, if that's all you're doing. So what happens is when you abuse cardio and and if you're trying to lose weight, you're going to be in a negative caloric balance. You're going to be in a caloric deficit. Your body's most likely going to get rid of muscle mass because muscle mass is metabolically costly. It takes a lot of calories for your body to maintain muscle mass. So if you took someone and they went into a slight caloric deficit, and then they started weightlifting, their body would, you'd be losing weight because you're in a caloric deficit, but you'd also be setting yourself up for future better body composition because you're now gaining muscle. When someone has a lot of muscle mass on them, they basically are, I guess I should rephrase that. If someone is increasing their muscle mass, they are now, in a way, they're increasing their metabolism. Again, like I said, it takes a very simple analogy I like to use is, think of muscle versus fat. Think of fat as like a very simple factory. It's a very simple factory. And remember, this isn't the truth, but just that's an analogy. Think of it as a very simple factory. It's a small factory. there's a lot of workers. I mean, there's a lot of workers, but they're not very fast workers. They work real slow. They're not smart workers. They're stupid workers. That's what I equate to fat as. Now, that's not the truth. Fat's very dynamic, and there's a lot going on there, but that's what I equate fat to. Now, muscle, on the other hand, I equate it to a very complex factory. A lot of shit's going on. There's a lot of people there too. There's a lot of smart people in there. Everyone's running around trying to fix things, and it's very busy factory. That's what I equate it to, and that's a very good way to look at it. So when you have a lot of muscle on you, your body is doing a lot to maintain that muscle mass, and it helps you have a better body composition. So when you incorporate weightlifting and some cardio into a diet that's in a slight caloric deficit, you are increasing the calories that you can expend while at rest more than what you could versus someone who only did cardio. So basically, do you want to increase the amount of calories that you burn at rest and look better too? Well, then add a weight training into your workout regime. Do you want to kind of look just skinny, or maybe in the worst case scenario, look skinny fat? It's like you're not fat, but you kind of have like a I guess you could say a fat looking body composition. And then also have a lower resting metabolic rate, then just abuse the shit out of cardio and then go into deficit. So you definitely want I recommend people include weightlifting of some sort or weight training of some sort in their workout program, and just not abuse cardio. And I'm not saying don't do cardio, but I'm saying don't abuse cardio and think that's the best way to lose weight. So again, better body composition, higher resting metabolic rate, versus again, I guess body composition looks are just a preference, but most people, I mean, from my experience, and I guess it's an anecdotal claim, from what I've seen, I've never seen anyone say the very skinny look is a better looking look than someone who has some muscle on them. Girls tend to want to have a bigger butt, nice looking legs, and I hate this word, but this is just a word that people use, toned arms. And then guys, obviously, most of the time want to look lean and jacked. So that a shit ton of cardio gets you neither of those looks. So if you want any of those looks, abusing cardio is not going to get you there. All right, on to the next question from Randy. He says, what do you do when you are losing weight and then get stuck at a certain number and can't seem to get past it? Again, this is dependent upon how many calories you are in a deficit. So for example, let's just say you're burning 2,500 calories in a day, and you start eating 2,200 calories a day. And let's just say that's what you did. And then your question was, what do you do when you stop losing weight? And when you're at a certain number and you can't get past it. Let's just say you're eating 2,200 calories a day and you're in a 300 caloric deficit every single day. And over time, let's just say over 4 months, you losing weight. And then boom, what you said happens and you stop losing weight. In that scenario, what I recommend is you decrease calories a little bit more. Because you have to think about this, is that when you decrease calories, to a very small amount like that, over time, especially if you're not weight training, over time, your body is probably going to lose a little bit of muscle mass. And then also over time is that people need to remember that when you eat food, there's a thing called thermogenic effect of food, is that your body uses calories to break down food that comes in that you eat. So it sounds kind of weird, but you're burning calories from eating food, not excess calories, not what you're getting from the food, but a little bit of the calories that you're getting from food that you eat is used to break down that food. So if you were only in a 300 calorie caloric deficit, and you stall, two things probably happen is you lost a little bit of muscle mass, especially if you're not working out. If you are working out, you probably didn't. But if you aren't, you probably lost a little bit of muscle mass, and that little bit of lost muscle mass lowered your total daily energy expenditure. And then two, the little bit of food that you're not eating, that minus 300 calories, is a little less calories expended from your total daily energy expenditure, which basically means that over that period of time, your total daily energy expenditure probably dropped from 2,500 to 2,200. So now you may think, okay, well, now I've been in a caloric deficit. How come I stalled? Well, you might not be in a caloric deficit anymore. You might now be at caloric maintenance. Again, that's just one thing that might be happening. So you might, if you were only in a small caloric deficit before and you're not below some extremely low number of calories. And what I would originally recommend, what I would primarily recommend, is you decrease your calories a little bit more. Make sure you're eating very high satiety foods so you feel full and you don't feel like you're depriving yourself. Now, one other scenario which I have to go over, again, because I have to go over this for your safety and to give you the best answer, is that another scenario is if you're cutting too much. Now, if you're, let's use that same scenario. If you were let's use a different scenario. Let's say you were burning your total daily energy expenditure was 2,100 calories, and let's just say you started eating 1,600 a day, and then you start losing weight initially, and then boom, you stall after like a couple of months. Now, in this scenario, what I recommend is if you're cutting so low and you're so below, and you didn't originally cut a little bit, let's just say you're cutting 500, 600, 700 calories on a let's just say you're cutting more than 20% of your calories, and you stall after a month or two. What I recommend is increasing your energy intake, and then start maybe adding some workouts in, or increasing your start adding some workouts in. Now, I hope that you're not eating 1,600 calories every day and working out already on top of that, because again, you might just need to increase your calories, which may sound stupid, but the thing is, if you're let's just tackle the first scenario I said again. If you're not working out and you're eating that little calories and you stalled, I would recommend is increasing your calories and adding some workouts in, because again, adding some workouts in is going to slightly increase your caloric expenditure. That little bump in calories you're going to add is going to help you start to maybe gain some muscle and have a healthier body composition. Now, I'm not saying increase your calories in more than what you're taking in. I said in this example, let's just say you're burning 2,100 calories and you're eating 1,600. Maybe bump it up to 1,800 or 1,900 and then add some workouts in. So now you're burning 2,300 a day or something, or 2,200. So you're still in a caloric deficit, but just not as drastic of a caloric deficit. So now, if you're already working out, you may just need to eat more calories, plain and simple. Again, that'll help you have a better body composition, and it'll help you have just kind of feel like you're not feeling deprived all the time. One thing that people need to realize with food, and again, like I just talked about, which was thermogenic effect of food, is that when you eat food, your body has to burn some calories to break down that food. Now, it's not more than the calories that you ate, but it's still some calories. But also, there's a thing called NEAT. It's NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Basically, and you may not notice this, but trust me, it happens in a lot of people, and it varies by person to person drastically. NEAT doesn't affect everyone, but it affects some people a ton. Is that when you're in a caloric deficit, you may not notice it, but you may fidget less. Things that are outside of your exercise, when you're not at the gym, like sitting, standing, you may fidget less, you may move less, you may not stand up as much, you may not walk around as much. Because you're in a caloric deficit, you may not notice, but you're just moving less in general because you're just not getting as much food. You feel like you're being deprived of food, and over time, these little movements that you don't do because you're in a caloric deficit can lead to, again, like it lowers your total daily energy expenditure greatly. So you're kind of doing it, again, if you're stalling, it may be because of that. If you're cutting too much calories and you're not losing weight anymore, it's almost like a oxymoron in a weird way, I guess is the best way you can describe it, is you're reducing caloric intake, but you're expending less calories. So, but if you're reducing caloric intake, your goal is to be in a caloric deficit. If you're in a caloric deficit, but you're now moving a lot less because you're in that caloric deficit, you're not weight training because you're in the caloric deficit, you're doing one good thing. It's like you're taking one step forward, but you're taking 2 or 3 steps back. So again, so to sum up your question is, if you're in a small caloric deficit and you don't feel like you're starving yourself, and you've been losing weight and you're doing everything correctly, maybe you're working out too, and you were in a small caloric deficit and you're not in some extreme caloric range like 1,500 calories a day, what I recommend is decreasing your calories a little bit more by maybe another 200 or 300. Now, in other scenarios, if you're in an extreme caloric deficit and you're working out or you're not working out, you probably need to eat a little bit more calories. And if you're not working out, add some workouts in there. Again, you don't want to go too drastic on the calorie cutting. So those are your kind of 2 scenarios there. I think I have one more question that came in. Let me look. Okay, he's asking. Yes, I do have one more question from Robert. He said, Exactly how much protein should a person be consuming to gain muscle? What's the set? Oh, he's asking a few questions here. Let me tackle that one first. How much protein should a person be consuming to gain muscle? Again, I've seen this in the scientific literature. From what I've seen, you get some mixed answers, but what I've consistently seen is 1.6 grams to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Now, a lot of people go around saying you need 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. If you're in a cut and you're trying to maintain muscle mass or even gain muscle mass, like if you're in a cut of calories, I recommend about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, maybe a crumb more than that. But for most cases, if you're not in a caloric deficit, I do not recommend, you don't need to get 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. That's a little bit unnecessary. Again, 1.6 grams of protein to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. It's kilogram. There's 2.2 pounds in 1 kilogram. So whatever you weigh in pounds, take that to a like an online weight converter. So calculate your weight in pounds, convert that to kilograms, and multiply that by 1.6, and then multiply that number by 2, and then that's the range of protein that you want to get in a day if you're not cutting. If you're cutting, I recommend 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight or slightly more. Again, and this can vary, and this may vary a little bit because I don't like using total body weights, because you could have someone who weighs 200 pounds has a lot of fat on them, and then you could have someone who weighs 200 pounds and is just pure muscle, and that person who uses pure muscle is going to need more protein than the person who has more fat. So body composition does play a part, but because I don't necessarily know your body composition, I would stick to 1.6 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight if you're not cutting, about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight if you are cutting. The next question you ask is, what's the set and rep range for gaining strength? Gaining strength is obviously weight's going to be relative, but for rep range, strength. Okay, when you talk about strength, people are generally asking, you could have a 5 repetition maximum strength. So it depends on what someone's asking you, what your goal is. But the typical goal is your 1 rep max. How much can you lift maximally one time? And that's how people say, oh, that's I want to get stronger in regards to that. Because there are some people who say, well, I want to get stronger in my 5 rep max. How much can I lift maximally 5 times in this exercise? But assuming that you're talking about your 1 rep max, what's the set and rep range? Generally, the rule of specificity applies here, is that it's the SAID principle, specific adaptations to impose demands. So to get stronger, you need to lift heavy weight. Now, can be a complex question, because that's not the end of it. That's not all it is. You don't just lift heavy all the time. Lifting heavy all the time will increase fatigue. Fatigue can mask fitness, and then over time, just having elevated levels of fatigue can lead to overtraining. But assuming that your other things are taken care of, I would say is the set and rep range. I would say for sets, anywhere from 3 to 5 sets. Sometimes 6 sets. That's a wide set range, I know. But for rep range, I would say obviously 1 rep for 1 rep max test, but you only want to test 1 rep with 1 rep maxes every once in a while. But again, you could do 1 rep sets at sub-maximal intensities for, just for a good experience on 1 reps. But I would say between 2 and 6 reps as a general guideline for strength. You should be training, most of your training should be in 2 to 6 repetitions. If you're training above 6 repetitions and you're trying to get stronger and most of your work is done above 6 repetitions, it's definitely suboptimal for training for strength. And your last question, how often should someone eat that wants to gain muscle? This question, this is something that, okay, how do I explain this? This is one of those things that honestly you shouldn't be focused on. Just eat what's available for you when you can, what's optimal for you, and try to avoid extremes. You don't need to eat 8 times a day to gain muscle, and I wouldn't eat 1 time a day, because 1 time a day you could be feeling hungry. There may be some adverse effects to it, but this question, it's focused on way too much, and by that I mean like it doesn't really matter. There has been no scientific data. If there is any differences between the amount of times that you eat, it's very, very minimal. Basically, it doesn't matter how many times you eat in a day. So you could eat 6 times in a day, and then you can eat 3 times in a day. And if there is any difference, the difference has been shown to be very minute or none at all. So this is one of those things that people try to focus on that give very diminishing returns or little to no returns at all. So what I recommend is, instead of focusing on how often you should eat to want to gain muscle, there's a lot other things that you can focus on that will actually give you some returns and investment to your time. So I've seen people nitpick on trying to eat 7 times a day every day because they think it's optimal for gaining muscle, but when in reality, let's just say they're doing that, but they're not getting in enough protein, but they're not focused on that. So obviously getting enough protein is a lot more important than eating 7 times a day, because like I said, the research has shown that if there is any difference between meals per day, it's very little, if none. So again, I recommend, just in this sense, just avoid extremes. So I would say, I guess if I had to assume a best, anywhere from 2 to 7 times a day, whatever's practical for you and whatever works with your schedule. All right, that was the last question, you guys. I really appreciate you guys asking me these questions. I'll probably do honestly one of these a month, because I do get asked a lot of questions. I'll probably ask for these questions a week ahead of time, because I kind of had to I would have liked a little bit more questions in this. But again, these questions were real thorough questions, so it did end up being a good long episode of the Exercise Science Podcast. So please keep checking back on my website, jpfitnesspro.com, for that stuff I said at the beginning of the podcast. But again, I'll see you guys next time.